Hello everyone and welcome to the other most requested game from yesterday's Title Tuesday. It is Hikaru Nakamura versus Hans Niemann. We've already seen how Hans disposed of Magnus Carlsen. They both had 8 out of 8 and then, Hans just continued on his winning streak and in the end he won Title Tuesday, having only one draw. And this is the other game you guys requested, featuring Hikaru. Hikaru went for the Bishop's opening, which you sometimes use to get your opponent out of book and you avoid, a lot of the main theory, such as the Petrov defense. But at this level, I think even Bishop to c4 is analyzed, to completion, I would say. So let's check it out. Hikaru with white opens with e4. We have pawn to e5 and the bishop to c4. This is the bishop's opening, and like I said, you use it to avoid many of the theories in mainline theories, and you can transpose into a lot of other lines. You can also play pawn to f4, transpose into some sort of a Vienna or a king's gambit later on. The knight usually gets developed to f3, but you can also play it with knight e2, d3, f4 later on. So it's very, very flexible, and for this time control, I would say very nice. And Hans just goes knight to f6. Now, also, I thought about, I thought about showing you this, but a lot of the time, if you play online, especially if you're lower rated, for example, your opponents will play knight to c6 and you will play queen h5, threaten checkmate, and your opponents will just play knight f6 and you will checkmate them on f7. You might think, okay, there's no way that actually this happens, but I've checked the Leech's database, and this position here with knight to f6 has been reached over 1 million times. So in the database, I have the numbers here. You can check it out. Queen captures on f7, and what's even more interesting is that this position has been reached over 1 million times, but not every time white played queen captures on f7 and delivered checkmate. Only 841,203 times did white play queen captures on f7, which is checkmate. 252,000 times players just continued with queen back to f3, which of course makes sense. Your queen is attacked, you bring the queen back. My point being that if you're lower rated, if you play, fast time controls, players will just automatically play knight f6 and you will get a very, very easy checkmate. As, like I said, this position has been reached over 1 million times. But here, Hans goes for the immediate knight f6. He doesn't want to even consider this to be a possibility. d3 by Hikaru and bishop to c5. We have knight to f3 and pawn to d6. So, okay, a lot of exact same positions in the database, so nothing new being played here. Knight b to d2, pawn to c6, and now usually people castle kingside here, but Hikaru goes for the unprovoked bishop to b3, and it is now as of move 6 that we have a completely new game. Okay, Hans castled kingside, and we have queen to e2, and for those of you who don't know, this game happened right after Hans faced Magnus. So queen e2, we have rook to e8, nicely aligning the rook with the queen and king, and Hikaru just nicely goes h3, stops bishop to g4, pawn to a5, now preparing pawn to a4, and Hikaru makes room for his bishop on c2. So pawn to c3, a4 bishop to c2, and pawn to d5. Hans says, alright, I've done enough, it's time to open up the center, as your king is still on e1. But again, Hikaru, pretty unfazed, just goes knight to f1. And d4, while it is very nice, objectively maybe hard to assess fully at this time control, and also, I mean, there's a king on e1, you want the position to open up. So Hans first goes bishop, pawn to b6, makes room for his bishop to come to a6, which will also be very useful. Knight g3, and d captures on e4. We have d captures and bishop to a6, attacking Hikaru's queen. Hikaru goes queen to d2, and now queen to c7. Hans declines the queen trade, and now we have knight to f5 by Hikaru. Okay, his king is still in the center of the board, but if Hans isn't careful, let's say he goes something like rook d8, Hikaru had queen g5 planned, and this is now a big problem for Hans. Even if you move the knight, let's say, to defend g7, you can also give a nice check here. After king f8, you will just go queen to f5, and not a lot you can do here. You can't really capture the knight due to captures with the bishop, and if you play g6, which is the only reasonable move, then you just lose a pawn. Okay, you enjoy an extra pawn, or worse if queens don't come off the board. So after knight f5, Hans realizes the danger, plays bishop to f8. Now queen g5 will not come with such impact, but still Hikaru plays it as it is a very good square for the queen. And now king to h8. So knight to h6 does not come with check. We have queen to h4 by Hikaru, preparing bishop to, and knight g5, and knight b to d7. Hans not worried. We have bishop to g5, and now knight to g8. So keeping everything in check. Castles queenside by Hikaru, and now you could play something like f6, kick the bishop back, and then start your attack on the queen side. Hans decides to do it right away. We have knight to c5 and the bishop back to e3. We have pawn to f6, so a bit of a different move order, and knight to h2, preparing to play f3 and then maybe bring the knight into the attack. Queen to f7 by Hans. The queen will be useful in defending the king side, but also you are eyeing that a2 pawn. And you should play king to b1. This is the most natural way to play, even though the position is already very, very difficult for Hikaru, and Hikaru is lower on time. Very interesting that Hans is playing faster than both Magnus and Hikaru. Point is that now after, let's say, bishop c4, you attack the pawn, let's say a3, bishop to a2, check, king a1, and bishop to e3. It's just very, very difficult for white to find a move here. If you go back with king to b1, then you can just trade, and then the queen comes into the game with check, king b1, rook a d8, you gain control over the d file, and very difficult for white to even find a move here. It is somewhat similar to what happened in the game. Hikaru played bishop captures on c5, which is not the best move. But Hans gives him a chance. He wants to stick with the plan that we just discussed, but opening up the b file would be definitely best, because okay, you're still threatening the a2 pawn. If king b1, you open up the king side. If b3, then c4, and if b4, then c5, and you open up the path towards the white king. But okay, Hans played bishop captures on c5. He sticks with his plan. We have king to b1 and bishop to c4. Okay, going after the a2 pawn. a3, we have bishop to a2 check, king a1, and bishop to b3, similar to what we've already discussed. And here Hikaru should play rook to d2, but even with that, we're going to show it. Yes, this, of course, we're not showing this sort of as what they should have played, because they're very, very low on time. I'm just showing it because, you know, it's a fun line, and I know you guys like fun lines. So you will, of course, contest the rook on the d file, and now after, let's say, rook h to d1, you will trade once, and after captures, you will capture on c2. Rook has to move from the d file, and then, okay, you can first play queen b3, attack the rook, and after rook d2, now bishop captures on a3. So this is the reason why Hans played it the way he did. He will now eliminate all of the pawns here, and then the three passed pawns, the queen and the rook, will be enough to go after the white king. Black will be winning here. So I imagine that's why he didn't capture with the b pawn. But Hikaru did not go for that. He played knight to d6, and this is just a very bad move. For one, it blunders the knight, and it's very hard to realize why Hikaru would do such a thing, because Hikaru, or rather Hans, could capture the knight. Let's say captures, and then he just captures the bishop, and there's no real move that Hikaru can make here. He's just down a piece. Even if queen g4 and preparing something like a rook to d7, which maybe was the idea, you can easily counter that with rook e to d8. So I have no idea what knight to d6 was. But okay, Hans trusts Hikaru. He plays queen to f8. Doesn't capture the knight, and now Hikaru captures the rook on e8. We have bishop captures on c2, and okay, you'll either give back the exchange or you have to give up the knight. So knight to c7, going after the other rook, and now bishop captures on d1. We have rook captures on d1, and now rook to d8. And here Hikaru played queen to g4, sort of guarding that rook on d1. And it seems that Hikaru avoided everything and that he's back in the game, but even threatening something like maybe knight to e6 in some lines. But Hans is completely winning, and you have to find the exact reason why while I give you a couple of seconds. So have at it. The reason is the knight on c7. It's trapped. And Hans played it. Rook captures on d1, as I'm sure all of you did. Hans spent 12 seconds on the move. Hikaru captured on d1, and now Hans just played queen to c8, and the knight is trapped. The pawn is preventing the knight from going here. The queen covers these squares. Also a8 and d8 are covered, and those are the 6 squares that the knight can go to. So the knight is trapped, and Hikaru can merely capture a pawn here for the price of a knight. So queen captures on c7, and now pawn to f3. And of course, Hikaru will still try. He has a pawn for a piece, but I mean, it's an extra piece. In this case, an extra bishop. And now Hans will have to activate the knight on g8, and then it will be a very easy victory. But we've seen Hikaru swindle some very lost positions against Hikaru. He's probably the best player in the world to do this, get back from lost positions. So let's see how the game continues. Queen d7, Hikaru went back, queen to c2, knight to e7, and now knight to f1. We have knight to g6, slowly but surely Hans's knight finds its way into the game. Knight to d2, and now knight to f4. We have knight to c4 by Hikaru, pawn to b5. We have knight to a5, and now bishop to b6. Not just to attack the knight, it is useful to drive the knight back, but also the bishop will be guarding that d8 square. The king is on h8, so you don't want, if the black queen moves, run into some sort of a checkmate threat. So okay, knight back to b3, and now queen to e6. Slowly but surely, taking away all of the squares from Hikaru's pieces. We have knight to d2, and now knight captures on g2, pawn to c4, and here knight to e3 with a double attack on the queen and on the pawn on c4. Queen d3, knight captures on c4, and he was in this position on move 42 that Hikaru Nakamura resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. You could maybe avoid further trades with queen b3, as the queen here is undefended, but once the queen is defended, that's it. I mean, you're just down too much material. There's no playing this. For example, knight to b1, you can even run into some very nasty tactic like knight a5. Now you either have to trade queens, and then you're going to play an endgame where you're down a piece, or you move the queen, and then you run into checkmate. Let's say knight b3 check, king has to go under the mask of the queen, and then let's say knight c1. This is a double check from the knight and the queen, king to a1, and then something like queen to a2 checkmate, or anything else. You either trade and go into a lost endgame, or something like this. But Hikaru had enough. Here he resigned, and Hans defeated both Magnus and Hikaru back to back. He wins title Tuesday with 10.5 out of 11, so he only managed to drop half a point, which is absolutely incredible at this level, and he's showing that he's playing better and better chess as we speak. He even defeated Daniil Dubov in a match just a few days ago, and I haven't checked on his match with Nihal Sarin, but yeah, if you guys are interested in that, we could also show a couple of games from there. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely played by Hans. I would like to thank Richard Schwartz, Brian Willits, Obaka Grafela, Norman Duda, and Justin and Olaf Love Chess for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check upon your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And do try this. Maybe your opponents, after queen h5, play knight f6, and you will get a very easy game. See you soon.